Homemakers shouldn't be extravagant. The electricity bill is $3, and daily food costs should also be $3. Upon my return from shopping, that's what David said to me. Show me what's in those shopping bags, Sarah. Okay, but why? Taken aback, I handed over the shopping bags. David peeked inside. Don't need this. Don't need that either. Saying that, he kept moving items to a different bag. As I was wondering what he was doing, David showed me the bag he had prepared. We don't need sweets. Return them. But those are my little joys during my chores. Didn't you hear me? Furious, David thrusted the bag at me. How many times do I have to say it? Daily food cost is $3. We don't need sweets. With that, he stormed off with loud steps. Then, settling onto the couch, he started to read the newspaper. Watching that, I was at a loss for words. As I stood there holding the bag he had thrusted at me, David spoke with irritation. Return them quick. The grocery store is a 10-minute walk away. It's the peak of summer, and it's so hot outside that it feels like everything's gonna melt. I had just gotten back, drenched in sweat from shopping. And now he wants me to make that trip again. And that's just to return the sweets I bought. I couldn't move from that spot. David. Do you care about money more than me? Sure, saving is important. But aren't there more vital things in life? Enough. Holding the bag, I began walking, making a vow. I'll show you. This so-called frugality. David. Be ready. My saving skills are unparalleled. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm turning 27 this year. I've been married to my husband David for 2 years. David has always been a bit neurotic. He graduated from a prestigious university, and everyone acknowledges him as a smart person. His intellect was one of the things that attracted me. But after getting married and living together, his nitpicking nature became all too evident. Sarah, did you clean thoroughly? The windows are foggy. Yeah. David was shouting by the window. I approached with a sigh. I'm a homemaker, but there are other household chores, starting with cooking. I can't be cleaning all day. Regardless, David would inspect the entire house, pinpoint shortcomings, and blame me. What have you been doing while I was at work? What do you think? Household chores, obviously. You can't even handle household chores properly, and yet you're watching TV bossily? I sighed deeply. Everyone needs a break. Besides, I was only watching TV for a few minutes. That's when David came home and started inspecting the house. Hey, David. What's this? Now he's checking the contents of the fridge. What caught David's eye was a basket of fruit. I didn't buy it. It was a gift from our neighbor. I was thinking about eating it together after chilling it. You accept stuff like this. Why didn't you ask me if you could take it? But I was about to say that we shouldn't dismiss such a warm thoughtfulness. David began to talk before I did. It's not but. Don't accept gifts like this again. Got it? David lectured me as if he was talking to a child. I felt disheartened. I got it. David sometimes treats me like a child. One of our acquaintances even mentioned that she felt he looked down on her. I can't blame her. Even I sometimes feel the same way. Indeed, I have a high school diploma, but I'm still less educated than David. However, I never thought that made me any less of a person. But it seems David feels differently. You're a troublesome person, Sarah. You never know what mistakes you're gonna make if I'm not watching. I was taken aback by David's words. He never saw me as an equal. This realization saddened me. For someone with such a high educational background, David's earnings aren't that great. He works for a mid-tier company, and there's no sign of a promotion anytime soon. Yet, he looks down on his colleagues. It's just so frustrating. My boss is just not smart. That was David's usual complaint. I don't know David's boss. From what I've heard, he seems to be David's nemesis. I wonder what the real story is. David has a habit of exaggerating when he gets worked up. So, I can't take everything David says at face value. David mostly vents during dinner. Drinking beer, his face flushes as he complains about work. That guy, you know. Yeah. All I can do is nod. I don't even know whether the person David's talking about is his boss, a colleague, or a junior. How am I supposed to react to stories about people I don't even know their faces? Slowly, David's mood begins to sour. You're pretty cold, you know? What? After all the hardships I've been through, you just stand there laughing. It's like it doesn't concern you at all. With that, he looked at me with disappointed eyes. That was unexpected, I felt. I don't think it's none of my business. I believe David is really trying. But, he's just not getting the recognition he deserves. I understand why he's frustrated with his coworkers and job. David, I don't really know much about your job or workplace. That's why I'm explaining it to you. You just don't get it. Saying this bluntly, David chugged down his beer. I was at a loss for words. A few days later. Hey, I ran into a university buddy in front of the station today. He wants to come over. I got such a call from David on his way home. I panicked. How could he expect me to prepare for a guest at this hour? I had only prepared dinner for the two of us, just the usual dishes. I'd have to run to the grocery store now, buy some food, or set out some ready-made meals. That's impossible, at this hour. It's fine, it's fine. Just whip something up. With that, David hung up. I didn't even have time to think. I quickly put on makeup and hopped on my bike. I stopped at a convenience store closer than the grocery store and bought some booze and snacks. That'll do. I'm home. Welcome back. Oh, and you too. Hello, thank you for having me. David's friend mentioned he was single. Perhaps because of that, he seemed more stylish than David. It reminded me of David when we first started dating and made me feel nostalgic. I couldn't help but smile, to which David responded with annoyance. Just because this guy's handsome doesn't mean you have to keep staring. I'm not staring. I led the two to the living room. Seeing the food on the table, David's friend exclaimed in delight. I'm starving. This is great. Sarah, come here. Contrary to his friend, David looked displeased. What's this? What do you mean? It's tonight's dinner and some snacks. They're all store-bought. Did you slack off? What do you take my friend for? That's not. Tonight's dinner was salmon chowder, fried pork chops, and a tomato salad. These 3 dishes were homemade by me, while the snacks were, as David pointed out, bought from the convenience store. But David spoke as if all the dishes were store-bought. What were you doing at home? Housework, right? That's your job. Don't slack off. I didn't slack off. I just didn't have time for it. David, calm down. David's friend, seeing the tension, tried to calm David. David conspicuously sighed in response. This woman's always like this, you know. I'm struggling. David. I understood. Just as David was bad-mouthing his workplace at home, he was bad-mouthing me when he was at work or with friends. In fact, when he had a few drinks and got in the mood, David said things like this. Sarah, you're gonna cheat on me with him, aren't you? What are you talking about? Nah, I can tell. You're that kind of person. He accuses without any evidence. His friend and I managed to calm him down. After his friend left, David looked at me with crossed arms. As his drunkenness wore off, he became increasingly irritable. Sarah, can we talk? What? I had a bad feeling. But I couldn't ignore him. As I paused doing the dishes to approach him, David suddenly raised his voice. I trusted you, Sarah. And you spectacularly betrayed my trust and expectations. I was so embarrassed. He spoke as if he was the victim. I just stared blankly at David's face. He was genuinely angry. It showed on his face. But what did I do wrong? It was impossible to run to the grocery store and back in that short time, let alone cook. But when I tried to explain, David just kept saying, "You're just lazy," over and over. David's bad mood lasted for nearly 3 days. Just when I thought he had calmed down, he said, "Homemakers shouldn't be extravagant. The electricity bill is $3, and daily food costs should also be $3. With clear anger, David stated this. That day was a holiday. David was home during the day, and he greeted me when I returned from shopping. But he was still acting strange. As soon as he saw my face, the words, "Don't be extravagant," came out of his mouth. David went to the living room and started inspecting the shopping bags. "Don't need that. Don't need this either." Saying that, he kept moving items to a different bag he seemed to have prepared in advance. I was wondering what he was doing. Then, David thrusted this bag at me. "We don't need sweets. Return them." But those are my little joys during my chores. "Didn't you hear me?" David was furious. I was taken aback by his tone. "How many times do I have to say it? Daily food cost is $3. We don't need sweets. Return them quick," said David. I was at a loss for words. I looked outside the window. It's the peak of summer now, and it's so hot outside that it feels like everything's gonna melt. The grocery store is a 10-minute walk away. And now he wants me to make that trip again. And that's just to return the things I bought. Even now, sweat is trickling down my forehead. I wish David would drive me there, but he was just sitting on the couch, showing no intention of moving. David never considered my health. Walking around in this heat was just too much. I might pass out. I tried conveying that with my eyes, but David ignored me and continued reading his newspaper. Fine then. I picked up the bag and started walking. All right then. I'll show him. This so-called frugality. Fueled by anger, I didn't mind the heat at all. I continued walking silently, accomplished what I had to at the grocery store, and returned home. "You can do it if you try, can't you?" David said, looking pleased. He still hasn't realized my true feelings. David. I've reached my breaking point. I can't put up with David's paranoia any longer. I can't break up with him until I surprise him. From that day, I embodied frugality. "What? What's this?" David, returning from work, was taken aback. I said matter-of-factly, "I sold all the electronic appliances to save on the electric bill." "What the hell are you thinking?" David yelled, but I ignored him. In the living room, there are just a table and 2 chairs. All the other furniture was gone. Oh, by the way, I also sold that component stereo David cherished so much. "Sarah! How could you do that? Are you serious? Tell me you're joking." Dead serious. I laughed as if David was joking. After all, we're trying to save on electricity, right? So, you gotta help out too. I told you to save money. I never lived extravagantly to begin with. I didn't live extravagantly either. I held back my emotions, just maintaining a smile. I can't let myself get angry too. I told it to myself and continued. "But since you said it, David, I decided to try my best." "That's what you wanted, right?" "Yes, but still there's a limit, Sarah. Where did you sell them? We need to get them back." "Forget that for now. Dinner's getting cold. We don't have a microwave anymore, so if it gets cold, you'll have to eat as it remains cold." Hearing this, David hurriedly sat at the table. I followed him with a wry smile. As David was about to sit, his expression froze. "What's this?" "It's dinner," I cheerfully replied. "Green beans stir-fry, mixed bean soup, and then—" "They're all beans!" David exclaimed in horror. I think David was neither particularly fond of beans nor disliked them. But now, he seemed terrified by the pile of beans in front of him. "You're trying to save on groceries, right? Then, we've got to make do with cheap ingredients." If you don't buy sweets. That's it. The discounted ready-to-eat meals. You don't like prepared meals, right? I said coldly, changing my tone. Besides, even the discounted items cost $2. We can't afford that. What about beer? None. I thought he'd have guessed by the fact we had no fridge, but David looked close to tears when he heard there was no beer. So, from now on, we're going to eat beans every day? If I find cheaper ingredients, I'll consider alternatives to beans. I said so and sang the prayer before the meal. Eat up quick. Green beans stir-fries getting cold. I can't live like this. It's been 2 weeks since we started living frugally. David said, his head slumped over the table. Sarah, give me a break. I was wrong. This is just too much. Let's save money in a more reasonable way. What are you talking about? I was quite excited. Once I started, I enjoyed frugal living. Having almost no furniture makes cleaning easy. David begged desperately. If you're gonna continue this frugal lifestyle, break up with me. David, you suggested it, remember? I said, feigning surprise. David just shook his head. I'm tired from work. I just want to relax at home. It's only stressful in this environment. We do have the air conditioner on. In this heat. If there wasn't. But I went shopping under the blazing sun, twice back and forth, because you said so. I said it like it was no big deal. But I was angry inside. David was too selfish. He never even tried to understand why I started this lifestyle. I'm not breaking up. Sarah! David looked at me in shock. My love for David was almost gone too. This was revenge. I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. He needed to taste saving a little longer. I can't stand this house anymore. Suddenly, David shouted. He stood up from his chair and walked out of the living room. David? I'm going back to my parents' house. I'll send the petition for divorce to the court, so see you at a hearing. Saying that, he walked from the hallway to the entrance, got out, and got into his car. Apparently, he was heading to my parents-in-law's house. I didn't care. David will be back soon anyway. Sure enough, a few hours later, David made me a call. Sarah, what the heck did you tell my folks? David's voice was trembling. With a wry smile, I replied. I told your mom about everything you've done to me so far. I asked her, is this how you raised him? You did what? Of course she didn't remember having done that. She was shocked to hear how you've been acting. I ain't making things up. Unlike you. I've got my proof too. I've been secretly recording my talks with David. When I played it to my mother-in-law, she was so shocked that she was crying over the phone. As you ran your mouth too much, my dad chewed me out and kicked me out of the house. That's rough. I nodded, as if it wasn't my problem. Honestly, I can't see why David's so mad. All I did was tell the truth. As a result, it was my parents-in-law's decision to kick out David. More to the point, David got what he deserved. It ain't just about how my parents-in-law acted. The fact that our meals became beans-centered and that I sold appliances were all triggered by David's words. Now they want me to go home and make it up to you. They're all siding with you. Sarah, what did you say to them? I ain't done anything. Even amazed at David's paranoia, I carried on. David, if you're so keen on splitting up, I'll give in to the divorce. For real? Yeah, but there's a condition. Out with it. David was all fired up. He really wanted to get divorced. At the same time, I wondered if a woman who was David's ideal really could happen to exist in this world. Give me $100,000. So that I can live peacefully after we split up. 100,000. Stop joking. I don't have such many properties to divide. But if we keep living frugally, I think we can save up that much. Till then, no way I'm agreeing to a divorce. That's nuts. David shouted it was crazy. But it ain't crazy. If we live frugally, we need a goal. I just smiled. I rubbed my still flat belly. I think it's better than monthly child support. Child support? Don't tell me. Over the phone, I nodded, saying, That's right. I'm 3 months pregnant. The reason I won't divorce you is this baby. Don't kid yourself thinking I still have feelings for ya. Sarah, did you tell that to my parents? Sure did. Speaking of which, they're probably even more panicked now. David was lost for words. I guess this pregnancy was the worst news for him. But it ain't the kid's fault. I'm excited for when the little one arrives, and I know I gotta save for them. Don't worry. We'll look for recipes and ingredients that are cheap, not just beans. And we won't sell the heating and cooling system. We gotta think of our child after all. David was now in tears. After being driven out of his parents' house, David had lost a place to go. With a child on the way, pushing for a divorce would be difficult. Got it. All right then. Come back soon. I ended the call with a smile. Ever since that day, David stopped criticizing my housework. He still didn't help out, but the fact that he stopped saying anything was a big relief for me. Mommy. Oh, Catherine, what's up? I turned around with a smile. A girl was born. Her name was Catherine. Catherine didn't get close to David. At first, David was fond of her, but she cried every time he picked her up, so he eventually stopped paying attention to her. Today, I drew this at kindergarten. Oh, that's so good. Did you draw me? Yes. Looking at Catherine, I could see features of David in her. But her personality was straightforward and not at all like David's domineering nature. I was relieved about that. Daddy's late again today, isn't he? Yeah, he's swamped at work. David had been taking on more overtime and working weekends since then. The fact that David wasn't lying was evident from his paychecks. He seemed to make a lot of mistakes in his crucial work, and climbing the corporate ladder seemed distant, but he was hell-bent on making money. You really want to get divorced soon? I asked David when he came home late at night. Definitely. Without looking at me, David replied, I'm gonna leave this house as soon as possible and get back to a life with TV and music. All right, good luck with that. David was working hard to reach his target. On my end, I continued to save money as a hobby, not as a punishment. David had grown to despise saving, but it was his idea in the first place. He had to take responsibility. David worked tirelessly and even went to the extent of asking favors from friends and acquaintances. Eventually, he seemed to have gathered the promised amount. If the wife is saving, the husband's gotta work hard, right? Yeah, that's right. Looking exhausted, David left my side. I didn't know where he was headed, especially after losing the trust of Sarah's parents. Well, then. I looked around the room. Perhaps I could be called a minimalist. Living with only essential furniture seems to suit me well. Catherine had adjusted to this lifestyle too. Drawing was Catherine's hobby, and she was often praised by others for having a knack for it since she was little. In fact, her dream now was to become a cartoonist. She had just started elementary school this year, but her drawings were already better than mine. My classmates also praise my drawings. That's great to hear. If Catherine stays on track, she'll probably go to an art college someday. The money I've saved up will come in handy then. On top of that, I've been receiving child support from David for Catherine. So, I didn't intend to use it for daily expenses. Well, Mom's gonna work now. Okay. I couldn't leave Catherine, an elementary school student, alone at home. After some thought, I started doing transcription work from home. The work is repetitive, but by focusing at set times, I could get a sense of accomplishment. Mom? What's up? I heard there's an art competition coming up. My teacher asked if I want to try it out. That's awesome. Why not give it a shot? I hugged Catherine as I said this. Catherine seemed uncertain at first, but soon nodded strongly. Yeah. I'll give it a try. That's the spirit, Catherine. I nodded in agreement. For Catherine, what should we have for our meals tomorrow? Planning meals is fun. I used to be forced to do chores before. Even if I cooked, David never said it was delicious. He was checking every corner of the room, looking for any oversight. I used to dread household chores. I was always anxious that I might have done something wrong or that he would complain. But now it's different. Now, I have Catherine who appreciates my cooking. I never imagined that it could make household chores so enjoyable. My life is fulfilling now. One day, I received a call from my son. "Where is Dad? Do you need something? Your father is now working at the headquarters, staying at the company's dormitory." My son, Michael, 23, who left home when he went to college, was silent for a while and then began to speak hesitantly. "Dad's company doesn't have a dormitory." "How do you know that, Michael?" According to Michael's explanation, when he was job hunting, he attended a joint information session. My husband's company was also participating there, and other students were asking if there was a dormitory. He seemed to remember that. Why would he lie about going to a bachelor's dormitory, I wonder? I became worried. Michael's silence continued. "Do you know something, Michael? It's a bit hard to say, but it seems like Dad is cheating. Are you sure you didn't see it wrong? I understand how you feel, Mom, but it was definitely Dad." Now it was my turn to be silent. I don't know what to say, I'm at a loss for words. The hand holding the receiver is trembling. I'm Patricia Johnson, 43 years old, a full-time housewife. I live with my husband, David, 45. My son Michael, 23, left home when he went to college. I get along well with my in-laws, and they occasionally visit our home. According to my friends, particularly having the mother-in-law come to the house can be unpleasant. I don't mind it, and it's nice to have various conversations. My father-in-law, Robert, 68, and my mother-in-law, Susan, 67, are on good terms and often go out together. They never fail to take their daily walks for health. Today, my in-laws are coming to visit on their walk, buying some traditional sweets from a nearby American pastry shop. I love those sweets, so I can't help but feel relieved. I brew some of our best tea for the guests and enjoy the sweets with my parents-in-law. Eating something delicious makes everyone smile. Michael called the other day. He seems to be doing well. I wonder how he's doing as a working person. I'm worried. Michael will be fine. He's responsible and a caring person. He's the type that everyone loves. I hope so. Patricia, I know you're worried, but Michael is a fine adult now. Michael's always been close to them. Since college, he has been regularly contacting his grandparents. He's a thoughtful child. He always calls me at 8:50 p.m. I wondered why. Noticing my curiosity, my father-in-law began to explain. He probably watches TV dramas from 9 p.m., right? So he calls during the commercial break. If it's past 9, it's in the middle of the drama, and that would be inconvenient. I thought that made sense. He was being that considerate. I think he'll do well in the company. That night, I told my husband that his parents had come over. But his reaction was indifferent. I can't help but think sarcastically. Is he still in his rebellious phase? He doesn't seem to get along well with his in-laws. He ended the conversation with a simple, "I see." And that was it. My in-laws are friendly and gentle. It's hard to believe that my husband came from these parents. When we were dating, he was always smiling, and he was always a gentleman. He would always walk on the street side when we were out together, but my husband changed completely the moment we got married. With an arrogant tone, he almost says, "I'm the one supporting you." Such an arrogant attitude. I don't know if my deceiving husband is the bad one, or if I was foolish not to see through him. I think the only thing keeping us together now is our child. But strangely, my husband seems in a good mood today. I got a position at the main office in the spring personnel changes. My luck is finally turning around. That's good for you. I was also pleased for another reason. I thought he might increase our living expenses if his salary went up. My husband hands me only the living expenses, and he takes care of the financial management himself. I don't even know how much he earns. Up until now, we've been living with no margin, just getting by. I thought we could have a little better life now. But that hope was shattered with words I didn't expect. For the time being, I've decided to move into the company's dormitory. It's too far for commuting from here, and renting a room costs money. I have no objection to my husband's transfer, and I'm all for it. You'll be on your own, so I'm gonna cut back on the money a little. I have my own living expenses, so this should be enough. The amount he mentioned is less than half of what we have now. I can't make ends meet with that. If you need more money, you can do whatever you like, part-time work or whatever. I was dumbfounded and speechless. You don't have to come to see me unnecessarily. It's a waste of train fare, and basically, women are not allowed. I don't even want to visit him, but the real issue is that cutting the living expenses in half is absurd. You're getting promoted, right? Why are you cutting back on living expenses? This is strange. I'm not saying I won't give you living expenses. So you don't need it, do you? I had no choice but to remain silent at that. Who would want to visit such a horrible husband, I thought. But I didn't realize that this was a sneaky way for him to discourage me from visiting him. I reluctantly decided to work part-time. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have enough for my own food. I visited the local employment office for the first time. Many people were gathered, looking for work. I printed out the details of a company I was interested in and waited my turn. I must have waited for nearly an hour. Finally, it was my turn. They contacted the other party for me. They said they would interview me right away. It was only one stop away from home and convenient for commuting. The place I asked for was a small office in a mixed-use building. When I knocked on the door and entered, it was quite different from the office I had imagined. It had a down-to-earth atmosphere. The person who interviewed me was very pleasant. He introduced himself as Bob, and I felt he was just my type. I honestly told him that I hadn't worked since I got married and that I was anxious. Bob said, "Everyone is kind here, so if anything happens, just tell me." There were a few simple questions, and it was decided that I would contact them later. I left the office, and I was contacted for employment immediately. The job was simple clerical work, and the senior lady was a friendly person. Especially Bob, who interviewed me, took care of me and often spoke to me. He doesn't seem to be much older, and he was a very easy person to talk to. On the way home, I stopped by a coffee shop for tea, or decided to enjoy living alone. But telling my husband about the current situation was a mistake. The freedom I finally got was quickly taken away. He continued to control me. In the evening, he calls home. If I don't answer, the next day he'll nag and ask, "Why didn't you answer?" What's more, even if I answer once, the phone rings irregularly 2 or 3 times an hour or 30 minutes later. I became frustrated. I couldn't leave the house in the evening. He's not going to give me any freedom. Then one day, a call came from Michael. "Where's Dad now? Do you have any business?" "If it's Dad, he's working at the head office and is in the company's dormitory," I said, and Michael was silent for a while, and then began to speak in a hesitant tone. Later, according to Michael's explanation, he had attended a joint company briefing session when he was job hunting. My husband's company was also participating, and other students were asking if there was a dormitory. According to the company's explanation, there is no dormitory, but housing assistance is provided, the person in charge said. I wonder why he lied about going to a dormitory. I became anxious. Michael's silence continues. "Do you know something, Michael? It's a bit hard to say, but it looks like Dad is cheating." Just when I thought he had finally started talking, he began to say something outrageous. Today he was making sales rounds with his senior. "Next, we'll go to this company." The company his senior indicated was the company my husband works at. He might run into his dad. He wondered what face he should make if he met him. My husband and Michael don't get along. They've been on bad terms since Michael's rebellious phase. Today's visit was just to say hello to the sales manager. The meeting ended quickly, and it's past 5 in the evening. His senior is going straight home, so he said you can go home too. Michael, even though he doesn't get along with his father, thought he might have business connections, so he thought he should say hello as a working adult. Michael, not knowing whether he could see his father, waited in front of the company for a while for his father to come out. He saw someone who looked like his father, so he tried to call out to him. But a young woman ran after his father. My husband, with a smile I've never seen at home, started walking with the woman. Michael thought something was suspicious and hid. The woman appeared to be about the same age as Michael. She was said to be beautiful and had a good figure. Without noticing Michael, his father walked with that woman, aiming for the city at night. They went into an upscale restaurant and, after about an hour, went into a trendy bar. He was following them with a detective's feeling but had to be careful not to be found. Besides, he had to be there for a long time without looking unnatural, and it was tough. And then comes the problem. Unfortunately, the two disappeared into a hotel. I was shaken by Michael's story. Didn't you mistake him for someone else? I know how you feel, Mom, but it was definitely Dad. Now it was my turn to be silent. What should I say? I can't find the words. My hand holding the receiver is shaking. My husband is cheating. And with a woman the same age as my son. My mind goes blank. Mom, it's okay. I'll take care of it, so pretend you don't know for a while. Do you have something in mind? I won't leave Dad like this. I won't forgive him for making Mom sad. I was glad to hear Michael's strong words. The only person I can rely on now is my son. Almost a month has passed since then. During that time, there was no contact from Michael and I became anxious. I continue to receive regular communications from my husband, David, as usual. I wanted to confront him about his affair, but I said nothing, just as Michael advised. The thought of a young woman, particularly one around Michael's age, going to a hotel with David makes my head spin in anger. I dream of the two of them mocking me. You're no longer needed, old hag. Just go away and don't appear in front of us. I don't want to see your miserable face anymore. How many times have I had the same dream? Each time, I wake up, groaning. Even at work, I find myself dozing off. Patricia, you look pale. Are you feeling unwell? I haven't been sleeping well lately. I'm sleep deprived. You must have insomnia. Is something bothering you? I couldn't tell the truth and gave only vague answers. I was going through such unsatisfying days when I received happy news from Michael. He had bought presents for everyone with his first paycheck and wanted to throw a party. It seems he wants to gather at his grandparents' house over the weekend and hand out the presents. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, but I'm glad. I feel that Michael has really become an adult now. I can't give you anything grand, but look forward to it. David hasn't mentioned anything about his affair. I didn't bring it up either, as I didn't want to dampen the celebration. On the day, I went to my parents' house early to help prepare the food for the party. I can't believe he's already working. It feels like he was just carrying his school backpack yesterday. Time flies. We're also getting older before we know it. I feel like Michael's birth was just yesterday. What his grandparents are saying feels very real. David is apparently coming that day too. It's been months since we last met. Should I confront him about the affair? I agonize over it. We line up the dishes that my mother-in-law and I made on the table. The doorbell rings, and it's Michael. You're early. Grandpa and Grandma have been eagerly waiting. Michael, whom I haven't seen in a while, looks a bit more mature. He seems to have tightened up now that he's out in the world. You must be tired, come in and rest. His grandparents are overjoyed that Michael has come. Even his grandfather came out to greet him at the door. I'm glad everyone looks well. Thank you for preparing everything today. Michael is ushered into the living room, surrounded by us. While I'm preparing drinks for everyone, Michael is bombarded with questions. Have you gotten used to work? Are your seniors not bullying you? Are you eating properly? His grandparents have a mountain of questions, firing them off rapidly. Michael answers without a hint of annoyance. My seniors are caring, and I'm gradually being entrusted with work. I'm getting along with everyone. And don't worry about meals, they serve them in the dorm. Knowing that Michael has settled into his company, his grandparents seemed relieved. But David sure is late. The food is gonna get cold. Speak of the devil, the doorbell rings again. Answering it, it's indeed David. I'm sorry for being late. Work just wouldn't end. David apologizes. Dinner is ready. I cooked, focusing on Michael's favorite dishes. Michael is repeatedly exclaiming how delicious it is. In contrast, my husband David is eating with a displeased expression on his face. Dinner is over, and we move to the living room. The time has come for Michael to distribute the presents. First, to Grandpa and Grandma, here's this. What Michael handed to Robert, my father-in-law, was a slender box with a ribbon attached. What could it be? Let's open it. Go ahead, go ahead. It's something Grandpa wanted. Out came a fountain pen from a famous overseas brand. Robert often has occasions to write, and I heard he's been yearning for this pen. I'm impressed that Michael remembered such a conversation. A Japanese fan was sent to my grandmother-in-law. A delicate design is carved into it. It looks quite luxurious. It's a must-have in the summer, right? Be careful with heatstroke. Tears slightly welled up in my in-laws' eyes. We'll take good care of it. We'll treasure it. Don't just store it away because it's so precious. It's meaningless if you don't use it. We understand. We'll definitely use it. This is for you, Mom. It was an elegant brooch. Let's go shopping for clothes together next time. I'll find something that matches this brooch. I feel like tears are going to overflow. My husband David was watching us with cold eyes. I wonder what you're going to give me. I'm looking forward to it. Then, Michael's expression changed dramatically. This is for you, Dad. And Michael handed David a large envelope. David spread the contents of the envelope on the table with a puzzled look. Several photos came out. As soon as he saw those pictures, the blood drained from David's face. He tried to hide the photos in a hurry, but it was already too late. What is this? David glared at Michael. It's not a prank. There's a report inside the envelope, Michael said. Michael took the report out of the envelope. It detailed David's actions. The other woman was Shelby, a 24-year-old colleague in the same department as David. Shock and anger welled up. What are you doing? Having an affair with a woman not much older than your son? Are you out of your mind? Robert angrily questioned David with a filled voice. David shrank back. Normally a gentle person, when angry, he radiated an intense vigor. You spend your salary on this? Use it on something better. David had no excuse and began shouting nonsense. Anger and confusion enveloped the family. It's Dad's fault for using money like this. Apologize to Mom. My mother-in-law Patricia raised her voice and started to cry. I raised him wrong, so he became like this. Patricia, forgive me. It's not your fault, Susan. I helped her up. It's partly my fault too, Susan. You didn't do anything wrong. David, explain yourself. David, seemingly resigned, began to talk about his affair. He said Shelby had joined the company the year before last. David had become in charge of her as the trainer for the new employee. At home, David was blunt, but outside he always portrayed a cheerful man, never without a smile. It seemed only a matter of time before Shelby was attracted to such a David. Perhaps she was influenced by David's behavior, and a little crush had developed. She seemed to find young men unsatisfactory. She was attracted to David, who was a bit of a bad boy, probably because of her family background. Shelby grew up in a single-mother household, probably longing for a fatherly figure in her life. Maybe she was waiting for an invite from her husband. It seems they became romantically involved quickly. It appears she really did get a job at the corporate office. They started living together after renting an apartment. To afford the apartment, they had to cut down on my expenses. He was worried I'd cheat on him because he was cheating on me. This resulted in those persistent evening calls. Even though he was cheating, he couldn't bear the thought of me doing the same. Such a selfish way of thinking, in my opinion. Though I never had any intention to cheat on him.
I'm cutting ties with you. I'll hire an excellent lawyer for Patricia, and I'll make sure you pay the maximum amount in property division. Get out of this house right now.
In the face of Robert's anger, my husband fled like a scared animal. Robert and Susan kept apologizing to me.
Don't worry, Patricia. We'll handle everything. We'll also support you financially. You don't have to go to such lengths. I still have Michael with me.
That's right, Grandpa doesn't have to do anything.
No, I won't be satisfied unless I help out. Just let us handle it, Patricia.
In reality, I didn't even have money for a consultation with a lawyer, so I had no choice but to rely on their offer. Everything progressed smoothly. My husband was head over heels in love with Shelby. It seemed he was okay with losing everything as long as he had Shelby. The divorce proceedings moved forward, and his infidelity and financial abuse were confirmed, resulting in him having to pay not only property division but also a settlement. The amount property division of was significant, especially considering he didn't provide for my living expenses. By paying the property division, he was left with almost no money, and I got the house. Robert and Susan decided to take care of the mortgage on the house as a part of their apology. Shelby, my husband's mistress, was also asked to pay a substantial amount of money. Shelby had been saving up for her dream, but now all that money would go towards the alimony. She seemed devastated. She tried to get David to help her out, but he declined. Can't help if he doesn't have the money. Shelby felt as if her dreams were crushed. She became mentally unstable and quit her job to return to her family home. I don't feel directly responsible for what happened to Shelby, but it still pains me. I regret demanding alimony from Shelby in my anger.
You shouldn't worry about it, Mom. There's nothing we can do. You just have to move on.
Michael is right. But my heart aches. Her family is on a remote island in Florida, and David can't easily visit. Moreover, it's a small community, so who knows what kind of rumors would spread if David showed up. It seems she's made it clear she doesn't want him visiting. After the divorce, to me, David is just a stranger who happens to share a name with my ex-husband. Whatever he does in his apartment is none of my business. He should just live his own life, but his obsessive nature is just too much to handle.
I messed up, please take me back. I realized your worth only after losing you. Shelby was just a fling.
David keeps calling me over and over. Lately, I just let him talk, then hang up without saying a word. From what he says, his place seems pretty filthy. He once sent me a picture of his apartment, and it looked like the stench would come out of the screen. I deleted it immediately.
They took me off sales duty. I've been messing up a lot, and people say my clothes stink. It's all because of you.
It's sickening to think I was once married to this guy.
How are you going to take responsibility? After getting caught cheating, from being the top salesperson, now I'm being sidelined to documentation. It's as if they're telling me to quit.
Can't he see that it's all his fault? I wonder how many times he's gonna blame others before he's satisfied. Is David even sane anymore? One day, David called again.
I'm coming over tonight, be ready.
He hung up abruptly. I was terrified. What's David capable of? I hesitated but called Michael, who was on a business trip. Just lock the front door and don't go outside, no matter what. How was he planning to help while being on a business trip? Regardless, I locked all the doors, including the front one, and put on the chain. Night fell. I was too scared to even turn on the lights. While I was trembling in fear, the doorbell suddenly rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Someone was banging on the door fiercely.
I know you're in there. Open up.
David's shouting terrified me, and I crouched down in fear. Then, I heard voices arguing outside, followed by silence. When the doorbell rang again, I saw Robert on the intercom monitor. I rushed to the door and opened it.
You can rest easy, I've driven David away.
I collapsed in relief right there, crying. My flustered father-in-law followed, then my mother-in-law came in.
Don't worry anymore, we won't let him near Patricia.
I had them sit down, and while serving tea to them, I thanked them.
It's not for Patricia to apologize. We are the ones to blame for raising such a son.
My in-laws had come because Michael had contacted them. They had apparently been hiding in the shadows, waiting for David to appear.
Tomorrow, I'm gonna have a talk with David. A captain I know is looking for someone. He works in deep-sea fishing, and once you're on the boat, you can't return to the States for a year.
We gotta get him on that boat to straighten him out. He's gonna listen to us.
Even such a foolish son is still our dear child. Just think of us as foolish parents and have a laugh. Any parent finds their children dear, of course. Patricia, you must have been concerned about David's mistress, Shelby, right? The money has been returned. She seemed fine. I'm sorry for the trouble. It must have been hard, being so far away. And the money. No, keep the money, please. Otherwise, we won't feel right about it.
Some time later, I heard from my father-in-law that David had gotten on the ship. Whether David reforms or not is no longer my concern. Now, I'm happy that Michael can participate in a big project at his company. And I hope for nothing but success there. My relationship with my ex-in-laws is good, and they still visit from time to time.
You're still young, Patricia. It's too early for you to grow old.
Actually, there is someone I've started dating. It's Bob from the company. With my husband's infidelity, I just thought he was a nice person. Going to work every day and talking with Bob, I found myself feeling at peace, but it took a little time to realize that feeling was something more. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. But now that I'm divorced, I can face that feeling honestly, and I confessed. Then, Bob also confessed that he fell for me at first sight during the interview. Like the changing of the seasons, spring has come to me again.
Lazy freeloader, get out.
While I was exhausted from childcare and accidentally dozed off, my husband kicked my belly, hurling nasty words at me. He used to be so kind and caring towards me. However, ever since we got married and had our child, he changed completely. Always making excuses like he's too busy at work or he's tired, he never helps with childcare. On top of that, he rudely refers to me as lazy because I'm always at home.
I want a divorce.
I felt that way, but given the current circumstances, I couldn't make that move easily. Then one day, I ran into my old boss and obtained some valuable information. Thanks to the support of those around me, I finally took steps to get back at my husband. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. I live in an apartment with my husband, John, and our son, James. Though it might seem like we're a perfect family with a child, in reality, we're far from it. I've been constantly troubled and hurt by my husband since our child was born. I met my husband at a singles mixer. I was 34 back then. I was working as an office worker, and my colleagues somewhat forced me to join the mixer. I was like, who goes to mixers at 34? Feeling a bit out of place, I sat in the corner sipping my drink when John approached me. He was also dragged there by friends. We hit it off and started dating, which eventually led to marriage after a few years. For a while after getting married, we enjoyed our life as a working couple. Then one day, during our usual life,
hey, Jennifer. Don't you think it's about time for us?
Time for what?
Having kids. I think we should start thinking about it.
John broached the topic of having kids. However, I wasn't enthusiastic about it. I loved my job and wanted to continue, and above all, I wasn't confident in raising a child. At first, I was against it, but John convinced me. He was like,
please. I promise to help you out.
And I eventually gave in. Looking back, That might have been the moment I started doubting him. Later, I got pregnant. Around the same time, I left my job to become a housewife and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him James. Several years later, my son, James, grew up wonderfully and is now 3 years old. I'm happy about it, but he's a bit of a handful and mischievous being a boy. Lately, he has trouble going to sleep at night. And I have another concern. It's about my husband. Before we had a child, he would say things like,
"I'm gonna be hands-on too."
But once James was born, he did practically nothing. At first, if I asked, he would help. But nowadays, when I sometimes ask him to take care of James, he's like, "Why? I'm exhausted from work."
You're just lazing around at home all day, so it's natural you handle everything.
Even on his days off when I ask, he's like,
"I want to rest on my day off."
He never cooperates. I'm like,
"Since he's our child, you should take care of him."
Then he's always like, "Huh? Who do you think is making money?"
"I'm working hard and making money, so you're able to live."
"You aren't working, so don't interfere." Indeed, it's true that thanks to my husband's job we can maintain our lifestyle, so I couldn't argue further. I've endured, biting back my words almost every day, always thinking that it's thanks to my husband that we can live this way.
"Jennifer, I'm here."
"Oh, Mom. Sorry to trouble you."
"It's fine. I want to see my grandson once in a while."
That day, I had invited my mother to our apartment. My body couldn't keep up with the constant solo parenting, so I had asked my mom to help out just for that day. Anyway, James has grown up so much. "Oh, by the way, I have something for you, Jennifer."
"What?"
My mom took out something from her bag and was like,
"This one. A baby monitor. Place it in James's room, and I can rush to him if anything happens."
"Are you sure? You don't even live nearby but came all this way."
"Don't say that. I already bought it, so it'd be a waste if you don't take it."
Saying this, my mom handed over the baby monitor. Having received it, I placed it in the room where James's bed was. That night, I'm home. Welcome back. My husband returned from work around 6 p.m. Soon after coming back, my husband was quickly getting ready to go out again, changing into casual wear. "Huh? You're going out somewhere? What's up? You got a problem with that? You could at least tell me where you're going." "Ugh, so annoying. I'm going to the casino, alright?" "The casino? Again?" My husband had recently gotten hooked on casinos. Apparently, he discovered the fun of it when he went with a coworker before. Everyone has their own hobbies, and going to a casino is fine, but my husband spends a significant amount of money there, and our finances are in a bad shape. Enjoying your hobby is fine, but don't spend too much money, okay? And remember, we have James.
"What? Are you saying we're short on money?" "That's probably because you can't manage our finances properly." "What does having James have to do with anything?" "Must be nice for you, staying at home all day. And now you won't even let your hardworking husband have a hobby?" "After all, I'm the one earning the money, so I have every right to spend it how I want."
My husband angrily headed towards the front door with that. When I was feeling completely exasperated by the selfish husband, I noticed something. My husband was unusually peeking into James's room. "What are you doing? What's that thing on the shelf?" "It's a baby monitor. My mom gave it to us." Oh my.
Always relying on others, even though you're just sitting at home all day. Well, if you got it as a gift, I guess it can't be helped. But don't you dare ask for help from your mom.
With that, my husband left the house. Regarding the camera, I surprisingly agreed with John. I never intended to rely on my mom just because we got it as a gift. But we had no idea that this camera would lead to such a situation. One day, it happened. 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. James had started running a fever since yesterday, and having been with him non-stop, I caught the fever as well. "Hey, John." "What? What is it?" I'm sorry, but James started having a fever since yesterday. And now, it seems like I've caught it too. Can you maybe take a day off today?
Are you kidding me? You can't just drop that on me and expect me to take a day off.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. But can you at least come home early today?
Look, I'm busy with work. And all this happened because you can't take proper care of James. You brought this on yourself, so I don't want to hear it.
With that, he angrily headed off to work. Though James had a fever, it seemed he was feeling much better, energetically running around the house. I hadn't caught a cold in a while, and combined with the recent lack of sleep, I felt quite dizzy. Even in this state, I had to look after James and ensure all the household chores were done perfectly. If not, there's no telling what my husband would say. Come evening, James finally took his nap. All right, time to prepare dinner. Just as I thought this, I suddenly felt drained and collapsed into a deep sleep. The next thing I remember was being awakened by my husband's shouting.
Hey! Wake up! Are you listening?
What?
You finally wake up! You're always home, lazing around, and now you take a nap? Must be nice!
It's not like that. As I said this morning, I'm not feeling well.
Stop making excuses! I told you this morning too! It's your fault for not taking care of yourself. Always lounging at home, can't you even do the house chores? Lazy freeloader, get out!
When my husband shouted that, I felt a pain and was like,
ouch! Hey! What are you doing?
He had kicked my belly while I was lying down. Even as I cried out for him to stop, he wouldn't listen. Just when I thought he was done, he was like,
fine! I'll eat out tonight. Make sure everything's done by the time I'm back.
And with that, my husband left the house. Why did this keep happening to me? It was not like I just lazed around because I was home all the time. I took care of our energetic 3-year-old son and managed the housework for my husband. Despite all this effort, being called lazy just because I was always at home is too much. I was at my breaking point. Tears streaming, I resolved to divorce him. However, at that time, neither my husband nor I knew. Someone had been watching this whole scene. After deciding to get a divorce, I quickly began preparations. Firstly, I knew that to raise James on my own, I'd need money. For a long time, I'd been a housewife, and my husband's income wasn't that high. Not only were the costs of raising James too high, but with my husband spending money on casino, we hardly had any savings. Because of this, I had to find a daycare for James and work to save some money. But, he got rejected from the daycare again. Seems like reality didn't always work out. Despite applying to every daycare in our neighborhood, he got rejected from all of them. At this rate, I wouldn't be able to go to work. I couldn't rely on my family since my dad had been recognized as needing fully care and my mom was busy looking after him. At this rate, it wouldn't just be divorce, I wouldn't even be able to leave the house. Feeling lost, I took James with me to do the day's shopping. On the way to the supermarket, I bumped into an unexpected person.
Are you by any chance, Jennifer?
Hey, Catherine? This was Catherine. She was my boss at my previous job. It's been a long time.
Long time no see. How have you been? Oh, is this your little one? He's adorable. Hey, how about grabbing some coffee?
Accepting Catherine's offer, we headed to a nearby cafe.
Anyway, it's been such a long time. You've got a kid now, life must be good?
Catherine immediately asked about my family. I hesitated to tell her the truth, but since I used to confide in her a lot in the past, I decided to share. The thing is, it's not. Actually, I've been thinking about getting a divorce. I then gently explained the reasons leading up to considering a divorce. Catherine, though surprised, listened with empathy. I see. So right now, you're looking for a place to take care of James and a job, huh? Yes, that's right. But I haven't had any luck with either.
Well, we're short-staffed at my place. If you're up for it, how about coming back to work?
If it seems feasible, I can talk to the management team. I also know someone who babysits. I can introduce you if you'd like.
Oh, I feel bad accepting so much help.
It's fine, really. No rush, but if you decide, just let me know anytime. Considering I had James with me and had to prepare dinner before my husband came home, we decided to call it a day there. While I felt sorry, I felt a bit better after hearing some valuable information. I'm home. I had finished shopping and just got home. I stopped for some coffee at a cafe, so I got back a bit late. After taking off James's shoes and returning to the living room, I was faced with a scene I wasn't expecting.
What? Why are you here?
To my surprise, my mother, who shouldn't have been there, was sitting in a chair, crying.
Mom, what happened? Is something wrong? That's what I wanted to ask you. I saw it, Jennifer. I saw John kick your belly.
Apparently, on the day I was running a fever and collapsed into bed, she had been watching the footage from the security camera. After a while, she saw my husband kicking me. Concerned, she quickly arranged for my father to be placed in a day service, freed up some time, and came over. I had placed the security camera my mother gave me in James's room, but the door had been slightly ajar that day, and she could see everything from that gap.
Jennifer, things aren't going well with John, are they?
Until now, I didn't want to bother her, so I kept everything a secret. But now that she had seen it, I couldn't hide it anymore. I told her everything, that my husband never helped with childcare, that he was emotionally abusive. I thought she would ask me why I didn't tell her sooner, but she just listened, nodding silently. After I finished talking everything, she was like,
"You've done well holding up till now."
She then patted my back. I was so moved by her kindness that I started crying. After I had my cry, I consulted with her. You know, I'm thinking of divorcing him. I think I can find a job, but I can't find a place for James. And I know it would be hard for you since you're taking care of Dad. There aren't many daycare options available. So, I'm not sure what to do. Don't worry about that. I can take care of James. I was actually thinking of placing your father in a nursing facility soon, so the timing is perfect. Really? Are you sure? I feel bad for Dad. It's okay. Your father would understand. I can't just stand by and do nothing when my own daughter is going through so much. Thanks, Mom. That was how all the problems I was facing regarding my divorce were suddenly resolved. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Maybe this was a reward from God for all the hard work I've put in. With my job situation sorted and having found a place for James, I began to move forward with the divorce. First, I started by packing to move back to my parents' house. I'd already told James to say bye to his daddy for a while and we would live with his grandma. James was still little, so he didn't seem to fully grasp the meaning, but he appeared excited about the new life ahead. Honestly, managing household chores, childcare, and preparing for the divorce were super tough. But, my mom came over often while my husband was away and helped out in various ways. I gradually sent my belongings back to my parents' house. I also reached out to Catherine, ensuring that my return to work would be smooth. And finally, the day came. Take care. As I saw my husband off to work, I started making the final preparations. Mom, you can come out now. My mom had come over the night before to help out for this day. My husband, when he returned from work, typically only went to the living room, bathroom, and his own bedroom, so I had my mom sleep in James's room. I was worried he'd noticed, but since he never helped with childcare, he never entered James's room. So we got through the night unnoticed. The fact that things belonging to James and me were gradually disappearing from the house, and he didn't even notice my mother staying over, what a clueless man. With my mom's help, we packed all my stuff into the car and had a service take them to my parents' house.
Well, thanks for everything, Mom.
You sure you're okay? Maybe I should stay with you. I get your concern, but I'll be fine. I'm gonna settle this, promise. Saying that, my mom took James and went back to our family home first. Lastly, I packed up all of my husband's stuff into boxes, shipped them to a certain place, and waited for him to return from work. I'm home. Welcome back. Huh? Why are you dressed like that? You usually wear those boring gray sweatshirt. You going out later or something? Ignoring his usual sarcastic remarks, I took his belongings. Unaware of anything, my husband just walked into the living room as usual.
What the hey? What's all this about?
What my husband saw was an empty living room, devoid of any furniture. Panicking, he rushed to check his bedroom, James's room, the bathroom, and the toilet.
Hey! What's going on here?
Of course, it wasn't just the living room that was empty. Every room, the bathroom, the toilet, they were all empty.
My stuff's gone, James is missing, hey! What's going on? Explain.
Don't you see? I decided to terminate the lease and move out.
Moving? Why did you decide that on your own?
Well, first of all, this apartment was rented by me, so it's only natural I do what I want with it.
Oh, is that so? So where's this new place? I bet James is there, huh? We better hurry. Leaving James home alone is dangerous.
New place? I don't have one, John.
What?
It's obvious, isn't it? Because we're getting divorced.
Divorced? What are you talking about? There's no way you, who haven't been working, can raise James on your own. Stop with that ridiculous idea.
The one with the ridiculous idea is you, John. I've decided to return to my old job. I've found someone to take care of James, so there's nothing to worry about.
No, you're the one who's crazy. If we divorce, you're gonna have to pay me compensation, right? You've been a housewife, and I've been supporting you. You'll have to pay me that compensation. You don't even have that kind of money. You really gonna go through with the divorce?
What? I was too flabbergasted to even speak. At the last moment, my husband seemed to think he was in a position to receive compensation. I took out my smartphone and played a voice recording. It was a series of verbal abuse comments my husband had thrown at me over the years. After hearing this, you still think you're gonna get compensation? Also, about not being able to pay compensation, I could say the same about you. Especially since you always blow your earnings on the casino.
Humph. Anyone can fake that nowadays with AI. That can't be used as evidence. Now, if there was actual footage, that would be a different story.
It exists.
What?
I then showed my husband a video from the day he kicked me.
Why do you have that footage? No way.
Yes, that's it. Remember that baby camera I showed you the other day? It recorded everything. And my mom saw it all live. Do you still think you can talk your way out of this?
You're lying.
My husband's face paled as he seemed to realize he was backed into a corner. It served him right. Well, isn't it about time? As I said that, my husband's phone rang. When John answered it apprehensively, the person was like,
"What on earth have you done?"
The caller was my husband's mother. In fact, after seeing off my mom and James, I had sent my husband's belongings to his parents' house. Afterward, I contacted my husband's mother and explained the whole situation to her. I also told her that I was going to discuss divorce today and asked her to find the right time to call my husband. This was followed by a good long lecture from her.
Jennifer told me everything. I've seen all the recordings and videos. What's with that attitude? The reason you can go to work every day is because Jennifer takes care of everything at home. And yet, you don't even thank her, and you treat her so poorly. I didn't raise you to be like this. Listen to what Jennifer says and come back home right now.
And with that, my husband was taken back to his family's home. During the lecture, my husband was like a broken robot, just silently listening. So, are you gonna confirm you contact the lawyer and leave quickly? When I said that, my husband just agreed to contact a lawyer who assists the divorce process and slowly left the house. Finally, I was able to put an end to my life with my husband. After that, I left the apartment and headed back to my family home. I got a restraining order from the police just in case my husband decided to come to the family home, as I didn't want him around. I submitted the audio recordings and footage from the camera as evidence. It seemed he might even face arrest based on this evidence. I communicated with my husband through my lawyer. Apparently, my husband was like,
I want to take back the divorce and try again. I'll do better next time and I promise I won't do anything like that again. Please forgive me.
But after all the horrible things he did, I didn't ever want to deal with him again. I was like, I'm never going back, and I don't ever want to see you again. I made him promise to pay child support. After leaving the apartment that day, my husband obediently headed to his parents' home. My husband's family's home was quite far from the company he worked at, so he couldn't commute anymore and eventually had to quit. My husband loved playing the casino, but it seems he can't do that anymore since his mother manages his money now. Regarding his job, when I explained the situation to the apartment landlord, word got around to other residents, and somehow, the news reached his company. He would have had to resign sooner or later. Well, I'm off to work now, please take care of James.
Don't worry about it. Come on, James, let's have some fun with Grandma.
I've successfully returned to work. Thanks to the kindness of my colleagues, I feel comfortable at my workplace. James is very attached to my mother, and we live happily every day. I truly feel blessed by the people around me. I hope to repay the kindness of those who have supported me by moving forward with a positive attitude.
Don't get so angry, I'll buy another one and return it to you.
I had my husband's watch stolen by a neighbor who is notorious in the neighborhood for her messiness. And it was worth $18,000 at the time. You're really gonna replace it, right? I decided to tell this neighbor, who's keeping her cool composure, the truth after my final confirmation. My name is Donna William. I live in an average household. I work part-time from morning until noon, and take care of the house in the evenings. My husband is currently working abroad on a job assignment. We have one child, and through that child, I became friends with a neighbor, Sandra Smith. However, I was shocked to learn one day. Sandra was the notorious in the neighborhood for her messiness. And she's crafty, with a habit of taking things from those she befriended and then cutting off all contacts afterwards. I heard such stories from victims of her and had stopped inviting Sandra to my home. Still, Sandra would frequently try to visit my home. Lately, she's been showing up without even calling in advance. Even when I told her it was inconvenient, Sandra wouldn't listen. Distressed, I called my husband and we installed security cameras. Today, my shift ended half-day. As soon as I got home, the doorbell rang. I had a bad feeling and looked through the peephole. Sure enough, there was Sandra. I thought of pretending I wasn't home for a moment, but Sandra kept ringing the doorbell over and over.
Hey! I know you're in there. Come out already.
She banged on the door roughly. Not wanting to stir up rumors in the neighborhood, I opened the door. Seeing that, Sandra snorted and walked in without asking.
Weren't you just pretending to be out just now?
When she gave me that glaring look, I said, "It's not like that," and poured some coffee. I've got plans today, I told her, but Sandra just wouldn't listen. She sat lazily on the couch, holding snacks she'd taken from the shelf without asking. This isn't that good. And it's instant coffee. You're treating me pretty rough for a guest, aren't ya? I'm sorry. I just got home from work. What brings you here? I was surprised since you didn't call ahead. We're friends, right? Do I always gotta let you know? I told her that's not the point and tried to end the conversation with her quickly. Ever since I started avoiding Sandra, she's been making snide remarks and complaints like she did just now. Her selfish behavior also started around that time.
My husband's gonna be late today. Oh, maybe you could invite me for dinner? You're gonna be alone anyway, right?
No, my child will be home soon.
So what? One more person won't hurt, right?
Listening to Sandra's audacious comments, I was upset deep down. But I couldn't outright refuse, and that night, I ended up having dinner with Sandra. After we ate, Sandra went through my kitchen and even started drinking. After soothing my worried child to sleep, I went to the living room where a tipsy Sandra awaited. It's getting late. As I started to say this to Sandra, she glared at me with a wine in one hand and a bright red face.
You telling me to leave? I came all this way to hang out.
Sandra frowned, clearly unhappy. She seemed pretty drunk. Since then, she slurred her words, scolding me and insisting that if I wanted her to leave, I should drive her home. I couldn't, especially with my sleeping child at home alone. But Sandra just started making sarcastic remarks again, as if ignited. At that moment, I noticed the bottle of wine Sandra had opened. It was the wine I had been saving to drink with my husband. I had saved up from my part-time job to buy that wine, a $1,000 bottle. I couldn't help but raise my voice.
Did you drink that wine all by yourself?
This one? Yeah. Got a problem?
That bottle costs $1,000. I bought it for a special occasion, to open on our anniversary.
Sandra then laughed heartily. Seeing my frustration, she mocked me, saying, "It's just $1,000. My husband is a doctor, so he can buy as much of this wine as we want." Your husband really doesn't earn much, does he? Sandra said, mocking my husband in the process. I was so frustrated, I bit my lip. Come on. Getting so upset over just a cheap bottle of wine? You're so petty. If anything, you should be grateful. Someone with taste like mine is drinking your wine.
Enough is enough. Please leave now.
But Sandra just gave a nonchalant reply and made a phone call. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Wondering who could it be at this hour, I checked the video intercom and there stood Sandra's husband.
Finally, you're here,
Sandra said as she staggered toward the door, leaving her mess behind. I couldn't just let her go on dropping things everywhere, so I helped her to the door. My husband is a doctor and he's super busy. He earns a lot and still comes to pick me up. I'm so lucky to have such a wonderful husband. Isn't your husband working out of state? He's hardly ever home. Maybe he's got someone else over there? Sandra chuckled mischievously. I was starting to feel repulsed by Sandra's baseless speculations. I just wanted her to leave and never come back. Although I glared at her with all my might, she didn't seem to care.
You should leave your husband and snag an elite one like mine. But I guess that's too much for you,
Sandra said cheerfully as she left. Her husband gave me a pained look, nodded silently, and went after her. 2 days later. Right after I returned from shopping, Sandra showed up again. I'm pretty busy today, I mentioned, but Sandra replied, I just need to use the restroom. I was hesitant, but then thought, what's the harm in letting her use the bathroom? Just then, a delivery arrived. Rushing to the front door in a hurry to receive it, I found Sandra comfortably lounging in the living room when I returned. As I exclaimed, "Oh," I noticed Sandra smirking and munching on the cake I had stored in the fridge.
Just taking a little break.
This is horrible. I shouldn't have let her in. I tried to tell her I had chores to do, but Sandra showed no signs of leaving. Frustrated, I left Sandra in the living room and went back to my chores. That was a mistake. When I finished cleaning up the kids' room and returned to the living room, I found Sandra rummaging through my shelves, apparently looking for anything valuable.
Hey, stop that. What the heck are you doing?
I hurriedly grabbed the box that held my husband's treasured watch. Sandra shot me a displeased glare.
Hey, why is this watch stored so carefully? What's the story?
I tried to dodge the question, but Sandra pressed on. Reluctantly, I explained. It's a limited edition from overseas, cost about $18,000 back then. My husband always said to handle it with gloves to avoid fingerprints. He's a big watch enthusiast. Sandra uninterestedly replied, Huh. Just $18,000 and you treat it like it's gold. Guess some folks just show their colors. If I ask my husband, he could buy dozens for that price. With a smug look, Sandra snatched the watch box from me. If you've got stuff to do, I'll put this back for you. Saying that, Sandra put it back on the shelf. I told her not to do it again, and then I headed to clean the bathroom. But I let my guard down. I completely forgot that Sandra had a habit of taking things from people's homes without asking. It was just when I finished my chores. Want some tea? When I said that, Sandra responded with a surprising, "No thanks." And then, she hurriedly grabbed her bag and headed for the front door. Shocked, I rushed after her. Sandra gave me a sidelong glance, smirking, as she reached for the door.
I was gonna leave after the break anyway. I'll be back soon.
Her quicker than usual departure made me suspicious. I had a feeling something fishy was going on. I quickly checked the security camera I had set up in the living room using my phone app. To my surprise, there was Sandra, putting that $18,000 watch into her bag without permission. When I checked the shelf, sure enough, one of the watches was missing. I immediately called her.
Sandra, my watch is missing. Did you take it without asking?
But Sandra just denied it, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." Yet, I clearly saw Sandra putting the watch in her bag. I pleaded with Sandra to return it, thinking there's no way she didn't know. But she snapped back, "Enough. I'm not interested in such cheap stuff. Maybe you lost it. Stop blaming others."
It's not cheap. It's part of my husband's collection. Poor folks are always so suspicious. Don't call me over such nonsense. Just buy a new one. Heck, I'll even buy you a replacement.
Sandra said that with a stubborn attitude, refusing to admit any wrongdoing. Though I wanted to shout at her, I figured she would just deny everything anyway. I guess I'll have to involve the police.
I'm definitely getting it back.
With that, I hung up on Sandra. And then I immediately called my husband. "Your watch. Look, the limited edition worth $18,000 got stolen. I know who took it, but they're playing dumb. I'm thinking of reporting it to the police. If you have photos or a proof of purchase, I'd like to see them." Then, William cried out in horror, his voice trembling. Turns out, that watch is one of the few in the world, a premium piece. Moreover, it has a unique mechanism that's no longer in circulation. If it breaks, it's irreplaceable. In the collector's world, it's sought after and now worth more than $18,000.
What? The other day at an auction, the starting bid was over $200,000. It's gonna keep rising in value.
I felt dizzy hearing that. I hurriedly took the photo of the watch William gave me and the proof of purchase from the shelf and ran to the police station. I had no idea it was such a luxury item. Once I reported the theft to the police, they acted immediately due to its high value. I wanted to call Sandra and inform her that I was coming over with the police, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Hoping the watch would be safe, I headed straight to Sandra's house. After ringing the doorbell several times without a response, the police showed their badge and urged her to come out. Then, looking annoyed, Sandra appeared.
Really? Bringing the police is an overreaction. You're trying to corner me without any evidence, aren't you?
Sandra said that with a smirk on her face. My irritation with Sandra reached its peak.
We have evidence.
I quickly showed her the security camera footage on my phone. The footage clearly showed Sandra putting William's watch into her bag. Sandra gasped upon seeing the video. "Setting up a security camera in your home? This footage looks like it's just meant to make me look bad. I was just thinking of borrowing it for a while."
That's not borrowing, that's stealing.
I reprimanded Sandra. But she just laughed off my desperation and didn't take it seriously. "It's just $18,000, right?
What if it breaks? It can't be fixed anymore."
When I said that, Sandra smirked and replied, "Don't get so mad, I'll just buy another one and give it back." Such an arrogant attitude without any sense of guilt. I couldn't tolerate Sandra's attitude and raised my voice. "You steal someone's precious item and have the nerve to act like this? I know you've been taking things from various people without permission." When I said that, Sandra's face turned red and her eyes narrowed.
Excuse me. Stop making these weird accusations.
Sandra muttered, "This is why I hate poor folks," looking at me with an exasperated expression. The feeling is mutual. I asked the police, "Can't you arrest her?" And the officers said they could if they had evidence and if the stolen watch was in this house. You'll never get inside my place. All this fuss over a mere $18,000? I could sue you for defamation. Sandra said that, glaring at me. I glared right back at her. Can I ask something? If you claim you borrowed it, you still have the watch with you, right? You haven't lost it or sold it? Of course. I just borrowed it. Even if I lost it, I'd compensate. $18,000 is nothing considering my husband's earnings. Sandra said, flaunting a smug smile. Acting so confident, laughing like she still has the watch. So, you really gonna buy it and give it back? When I pressed further, Sandra, out of frustration, promised she would buy and return it if it was damaged or lost. To make sure she couldn't weasel out of it, I recorded her words on my phone.
Why are you so persistent? Do you really want to paint me as a thief? It's just a watch after all.
I told Sandra what my husband had told me. Actually, when that watch was purchased, it was $18,000. Now, it's become a collector's item and is worth at least $200,000. Sandra, hearing my words, stammered and started to sweat.
No way. That's a bluff. You're trying to trick me.
It's true. Look at this. I showed her a screen my husband sent me. On an auction website, the price has now soared to $280,000. Sandra stared at the screen, her face pale as stone. If you return the stolen item now, I won't ask you to buy it. When I said that, Sandra frantically rummaged through her bag by the entrance. Then, she roughly handed over something. It was my husband's watch. But the face was cracked and it had scratches.
What? How did this happen?
When I looked at Sandra in shock, she defensively claimed it was broken from the start. I told her that couldn't be the case, but Sandra kept insisting she didn't know. I decided to show Sandra a picture my husband had taken. This is a picture my husband took when he got home this month. It isn't broken, right? Then, Sandra started accusing me of breaking it. I shook my head in denial. I never touch my husband's collection with my bare hands. He always uses gloves, too. You remember me explaining that, right? If we do a fingerprint test, we'll instantly know who broke it.
You can't prove anything. You might have wiped it down after touching it.
Well, let's do this then. We have a week's worth of security footage. Let's review it and see if I ever touched it with my bare hands. If the only person we see touching it is you, that's pretty incriminating, isn't it? I handed over my phone to the police. The officers checked it immediately. Sandra, with a pale face, tried to stop both me and the police, but she was apprehended on the spot. I won't let this slide. You promised, right? If it's broken or lost, you'd buy a replacement.
I never said that.
Yes, you did. I've got the recording. Stop resisting now. Admit to what you did and take responsibility. Upon hearing this, Sandra finally gave in and began explaining herself. Apparently, she was just jealous that I had expensive items. I was utterly flabbergasted by her behavior and had no intention of forgiving her actions. Take responsibility for what you've done. I told her this and decided to leave the rest to the police. In the end, Sandra was arrested on suspicion of theft and vandalism. Subsequent searches of her house revealed other luxury items she had stolen from the neighbors. While Sandra claimed they were all borrowed, the victims refuted her claims. If the evidence continues to pile up, she'll likely end up in jail. I told Sandra that if she paid me back for the watch, I would drop the charges. Hearing that, she begged her husband, saying she didn't want to go to prison. However, it seemed her husband had grown weary of her excessive spending and brash attitude, and he decided to cut ties. Ultimately, Sandra couldn't afford to buy back the watch. Her husband billed her for the significant repair costs, leaving her in debt. With Sandra no longer coming around, I felt at ease. My husband returned home after his overseas assignment. Using the compensation we received, we hired a skilled watchmaker, and thankfully, my husband's watch was restored to its former glory. Now, my child, husband, and I live happily together.
A woman who just lounges around the house without earning any money has no urgent matters to deal with. Why are you staying at home without doing housework?
My husband berated me when work piled up and I couldn't manage the household chores. In my anger, I left the house and an unexpected turn of events occurred because of something I discovered. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm 49 years old and work as a designer. I design brochures for various lectures and events, and creating posters has been my recent job. I started this designer job 25 years ago, when I had my son and wanted to work from home. Before that, I worked in an office at a company, so I started my design career with zero experience. At first, I didn't understand the specifications and struggled with the design software. I even thought maybe this job wasn't for me. However, a senior colleague at my current company understood my situation and patiently taught me the basics. Back then, remote work wasn't common, but for me, with a newborn, they would share their computer screen online and guide me through various things. Thanks to that, I'm now in a position where I teach my juniors. While handling my own job, I also teach those who, like me, are starting from scratch aiming to become designers. During the day, I primarily work as a designer, and in my spare time, I somehow manage to get the household chores done. I live with my husband, John, and my son, Michael. John, 2 years older than me, is an IT professional. We met through a friend's introduction and bonded over attending concerts of a certain band, eventually leading to our marriage. Michael is now 25, and since graduating from college, he's been working at an insurance company nearby. Both of them seem great to outsiders, and neighbors are often like,
"What a lovely husband and son you have."
But in reality, both John and Michael are far from wonderful in my eyes. Before Michael was born, John was indeed a great boyfriend and husband. But after Michael's birth, when I quit my job, John changed drastically. Once I stopped working outside, John started boasting about his job, saying he's superior since he's the breadwinner, and began spending money recklessly. Even when I began working as a designer, he'd belittle my job, saying any home-based job was easy and anyone could do it, that he was the one doing all the complicated tasks, and he wouldn't listen when I tried to defend myself.
"You, who can't earn much, should be grateful to me and listen to me."
I've thought of leaving him multiple times because of such statements. The reason I didn't divorce was because I thought it'd be better for Michael to have a father. I grew up in a single-parent household without an adult at home. Remembering the loneliness from those times, I didn't want Michael to feel the same. Contrary to my hopes, perhaps due to John's influence, Michael grew up with the skewed notion that men who work are noble and women are incompetent. Though he's well-mannered in public, he often hurls harsh words at me, calling me useless. Despite both claiming they're earning, neither contribute more than $100 to the household each month. John spends his money on drinks, and Michael splurges on clothes and accessories, leaving all household responsibilities to me. I was doing my best to manage the household finances while thinking every day about how to make ends meet. Furthermore, they both use their jobs as an excuse to avoid any housework. I once left chores undone, hoping they'd pitch in, but they ignored dishes piled in the sink and laundry baskets overflowing, forcing me to step in. I taught Michael basic chores when he was little, but now I wonder if he even remembers. This is why I'm left with all the housework. Even though I work too, I considered getting some handy household appliances to ease the chores, but John and Michael vehemently opposed. It was frustrating when they argue that, since I only work from home, it would mean I've hit rock bottom if I also cut corners with housework. No matter how often I explain that being a designer isn't easy, they just don't listen. They seem to think that just because I work from home, it's a laid-back job that requires no special skills. Originally, the reason I started working from home was because John never helped with child raise when Michael was young. Back then, John was hardly ever home, always using work as an excuse, and wouldn't even take a day off when I was sick. Even after work, he'd always go out for drinks with coworkers, claiming it was still part of the job. When I was struggling with child-rearing and found out John had somehow arranged a celebratory drink for himself, I was livid. Yet, thinking of Michael, I've continued our married life and started my home-based job. Seeing how Michael turned out makes me want to sigh. I tried hard to instill proper values in him, but in the end, he seemed to be influenced more by the closest male figure, John. Just yesterday, Michael returned home past midnight after hanging out, apparently having had junk food. He even left the trash on the dining table. While I shook my head at his behavior, I started my busy day with tasks like taking out the trash and making breakfast. Then, one day, just before 5 p.m., usual time I get off work, I was suddenly assigned a new project. Initially, someone else was handling it, but the person fell ill, and a request came in for a revision to be submitted by the next morning. Everyone else was occupied, and I was the only one available, so the task fell on me. I usually enjoy flexible hours without overtime, but I decided to buckle down and get to work on this. Luckily, the original person in charge had sent me notes and documents from meetings, and the revision instructions weren't too complicated. Still, revising a design made for a client I'd never met or talked to was quite challenging. I reviewed the styles and themes of past client event posters and websites, making sure to try different approaches without straying too far from their preferences. By the time I felt I was finally done, it was already 9 p.m., and it took me by surprise. Before I realized it, what was once dusk outside had turned pitch black, and I had been so engrossed in my work that I even forgot to eat. At that moment, I heard the front door open. Around this time, it's usually John who comes home. Michael's been out late partying these days, so with that in mind, I pondered what to do next while sending out my data. When I walked into the living room, John was already seated at the dining table, engrossed in his smartphone. "What about dinner?" Without even looking up when he heard me enter, that was all he said. But, since I usually start preparing dinner after I finish work, I hadn't even begun cooking yet. Feeling a bit annoyed by John's attitude, I explained the situation. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day for me, and I haven't been able to prepare anything. I haven't eaten either, so how about we order food delivery?" I said this while making myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, expecting an agreement from John. Instead, a loud thud reached my ears. I looked over to see John, glaring at me with anger, having slammed his fist on the table. "You haven't prepared dinner? What were you thinking?" Stunned by his sudden outburst, I found myself trying to justify my actions. I guess anyone would feel the need to defend themselves when confronted so aggressively. "Well, but you sometimes come home late from work too, right? Today was an urgent task, and there was just no helping it. No matter how regular a job might be with its 9-to-5 schedule, sometimes overtime is unavoidable." I thought that by comparing my situation to that, even John would understand. However, far from calming down, John's anger only seemed to intensify. He raised an eyebrow and began shouting at me. "A woman who lounges around at home without earning any money has no emergencies or responsibilities. What's the point of being home if you don't even do housework?" I always knew John felt this way, but it still angered me to have it thrown in my face so bluntly. He always belittles my job, and I wonder if he thinks of me as just some kind of maid or something. Driven by that thought, instead of my usual attitude, I directly countered him. "You know, I do work and I do get paid. If anyone's loafing around at home, it's you and Michael, isn't it?" For the first time in a while, expressing what I truly felt was a weight off my chest. On the other hand, probably because my words were true, John's face turned beet red in rage and he shouted even louder. "What the heck? You've got some nerve talking back when you're living off my money. That's it, get out right now." The smirk on John's face told me he was hoping I'd plead with him to stay. Certainly, he was probably expecting me to apologize to ensure I was not kicked out of this house, and to start preparing dinner right now. It was like tactics used by grade schoolers who bully their classmates. My husband says such things to the wife he lives with, and my son shares the same values. After hearing John's comments, I suddenly felt sick of living with such people. Yeah, I got it. I'll leave now. I said that to John, who was smirking, and quickly packed my essential work laptop, some documents, and a few clothes into a bag. In addition to my usual handbag, I put on a big backpack filled with my belongings and headed for the front door. Noticing me, John, seemingly taken aback, hurriedly ran out from the living room. I guess he didn't think I would actually leave, and do so immediately.
Hey, where are you going?
Is panicking the right word? John asked with a voice that was a mix of confusion and urgency. Irritated by that, I sighed and looked back at John. Didn't you tell me to leave? I'm not so foolish to want to stay after hearing that. At my words, John looked regretful but wasn't straightforward enough to ask me to stay, so he just mumbled and remained silent. I turned to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped outside. The words John threw at me were so childish, I almost laughed.
Just remember, whatever happens, it's not my fault.
Ignoring him, I closed the door and headed towards the station. There were a few hotels near our local station. There weren't any events nearby today, so there should be at least one room available tonight. I assumed as much and decided to call a hotel I found online. That day, I managed to check into the first hotel I called. I hadn't stayed in a hotel in ages, and it was nice to see that there was a cafe on the first floor so I didn't have to worry about meals. The convenience of having a laundromat nearby made me feel quite excited. Having missed dinner, I bought a sandwich and salad from a supermarket and ate it in my room. Usually, I'm always preparing meals at home to save money, so the taste of ready-made food felt incredibly delicious. There is merit to homemade food, but you still get tired of a bit making things by yourself every time. My breakfast the next day was simple, toast and scrambled eggs, but not having to prepare it myself made it feel all the more special. After eating, I went back to my hotel room to work. Most hotels these days have internet access via Wi-Fi, so there were no issues there. The revisions I sent out yesterday got the green light from the client, so that was a relief. While working, I pondered what to have for lunch. When I thought about heading out for my lunch break, I noticed a message from John. The message was sent about 30 minutes ago, which was odd since John usually would be at work at this time. It seemed that John had taken time off just to harass me.
You won't have a home to return to anymore.
With those words, he had attached a picture of my belongings scattered around the local dumpster. Around the same time, I also noticed a message from Michael.
Looks like Dad's been clearing out your stuff since this morning. Serves you right.
After checking those messages and pictures, I immediately requested time off for the afternoon and rushed out of the hotel. Many of the items scattered in the photos were work-related books which would cost a lot to replace. Moreover, even though the trash had already been picked up, I thought it'd be a nuisance to the neighbors to have my belongings scattered about. So, I rented a car and headed to the dump. When I got there, just as the pictures had shown, my work stuff, hobby books, and even clothes were scattered without being bagged. I couldn't fathom how someone could lack common sense to this degree. Frustrated, I gathered everything and stuffed it into the rental car. Among the scattered items, I noticed something out of place. Huh? Is this? While puzzled, I prioritized collecting my belongings and continued with the task. After collecting all my belongings, I decided to drive straight to my parents' home. My childhood home is about an hour's drive away. My mother greeted me with a surprised but warm smile. I didn't want to worry her too much, so I hid the details and just asked to store my things, and moved the dumped items into a room at my parents' place. She seemed to sense that something was amiss. Feeling guilty, I left my parents' place. After returning to the hotel from my parents' home, I did some work and then had dinner. There was something truly appreciable about having a meal made by someone else. Moreover, being freed from the day's domestic tasks, my work felt a lot easier. Normally, while working, part of my mind would always be occupied by household chores. Now, without those distractions, I could focus solely on work. Feeling content, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, my smartphone rang out of the blue. As my smartphone suddenly started ringing, I thought it might be work-related, so I answered the call without even checking the caller on the screen.
Hey! You took my treasure, didn't ya? Don't mess with me.
The next instant, Michael's yelling blasted through the phone. It seemed he didn't care about how loud he was being, either because he was so angry or just to annoy me. As the ringing in my ears continued, I tried to comprehend what Michael was yelling about. Then, it hit me. I remembered something. To begin with, Michael's prized possessions were a collection of expensive sunglasses and high-end brand accessories that he cherishes deeply. Each piece has cost several $1,000s, and Michael had about 10 of them. Why would I take them? Didn't I just give you the jewelry box without saying anything a while ago? I used to keep all my jewelry in a jewelry box on the bathroom counter. But one day, Michael took out all my things and started putting his accessories in. I thought it was mine, but I figured it's better than getting complained at for damaging or losing his pricey items. So, I just gave the jewelry box to Michael. If I had any intentions of doing something to Michael's treasures, I would have taken precautions back then. However, Michael seemed to be convinced that I did it and wouldn't listen to reason.
No, it was definitely you. Is this some sort of payback for what Dad did?
I sighed in exasperation at Michael's outrage and how he conveniently forgot his own actions. I decided to share what I saw at the trash dump earlier. By the way, I might have seen my jewelry box at the dump. But I thought it was empty since it didn't have my stuff, so I left it. Upon hearing this, Michael's breath hitched. He probably realized his accessories and sunglasses might still be inside. The jewelry box was something I bought during my single days. John probably remembered it as my stuff and just discarded it at the dump without a second thought. After all, John wouldn't know that the things inside had changed to Michael's belongings.
You gotta be kidding me. What are you gonna do about my accessories?
It was almost midnight, and John should have been asleep by that time. Still, over the phone, I could hear Michael shouting angrily, presumably at John. I felt he didn't care about me anymore, and, annoyed by his immaturity, I hung up. Later, I decided to check out the mentioned trash dump. To my surprise, I found John and Michael arguing there.
It's your fault for being so careless. Getting upset over some jewelry and sunglasses is just ridiculous.
Self-centered John voiced his opinion, to which Michael retorted while stamping his foot in frustration.
What? It's obviously Dad's fault. All of these cost more than $10,000, you know.
Hearing the amount, John started yelling about wasteful spending, creating a vicious cycle of blame. In Michael's hand was a pair of sunglasses with broken lenses, rendering them worthless. The other accessories, which Michael had always kept in pristine condition, were probably damaged too. But John had carelessly dumped my luggage around here, so I bet there are scratches on the accessories as well.
Oh my gosh, my necklace! If it's this damaged, it's worthless now.
Michael lets out a scream-like shout, only to be mocked by John as being too effeminate. Arguing loudly in the middle of the night, I thought it would surely bother the neighbors, so I decided to intervene. Hey, it's already midnight, you know? Can't you consider the people around here? Hearing my voice, the two quickly turned towards me. And then, taking a deep breath, John started yelling at me.
All of this is your fault, Michelle. Why are you standing there so irresponsibly?
Could he genuinely believe that it was more my fault for not doing the housework than his strange actions? I got fed up with that, reached into my bag and began to speak as I pulled something out.
You're the one at fault for tossing someone's stuff without even checking. Enough's enough, it's over.
What I was holding was a document from a lawyer who assists divorce process. After return to the hotel from my parents' house, I had decided to get a divorce right away and had contacted a lawyer at the hotel. Thankfully, I already had my belongings with me. I felt a sense of relief thinking that I just needed to consult a lawyer. Seeing the document, John glared at me, saying something incomprehensible, as if accusing me of trying to escape. But to me, divorce isn't about escaping or anything of the sort. Wanting John to understand this, I decided to reveal a truth I had kept hidden.
Enough already, who do you think you are? I have evidence of all the verbal abuse from both you and Michael.
The truth was, ever since Michael graduated college, I've been documenting the verbal abuse from both him and John. I had hesitated to divorce, but I believed this would be advantageous if the need arose.
You don't have the right to refuse a divorce, John. If you don't want this to go to court, just agree it now.
I was certain that saying this would make John give in. John has always been prideful, and the thought of losing in court would surely break him. It seemed he's realized that, while he had no evidence, I had 3 years' worth of it.
Got it. I just have to agree this, right?
Despite John's reluctant decision, Michael was the one who wouldn't let it go. With a voice full of defiance, Michael ranted on, as if refusing to accept the decision to divorce.
What? Then who's gonna do the chores? I sure as hell ain't gonna do it.
Exasperated by Michael's immature outburst, which resembled a teenage rebellion, it seemed John reached his breaking point.
Enough. Shut up. Stop being so selfish.
Those words, coming from me, were something I'd have liked to throw right back at John. However, within John, there seemed to be a sense of urgency. With this, if I have let my mood sour and threatened to take this to court, it seemed like John would be in trouble. He was trying to silence Michael for the sake of his own pride. Michael, angered by John's actions, headed back home making a fuss. Ignoring Michael, John and I decided to enter a nearby diner to check the document and exchange the lawyer's contact. Even though it was late at night, the diner still had a fair number of young people. I ordered just coffee and wait as John checked the document. He probably wanted to get this over with quickly. By the time I finished my coffee, he'd done, and I stood up with them.
Well then, I'll have the lawyer get in touch with you regarding consultation fees.
I thought it was only natural to say that, but it seemed John hadn't even considered the fees. Maybe he thought he wouldn't have to pay it unless it went to court.
Hey, hold on, are you planning to take money from me?
As John stood up and shouted loudly, the states of those around us pierced through. I was also standing up, holding the papers, so to an onlooker, it must have been an interesting, gossipy situation. I had nothing to hide, so I could have spoken up, but John fell silent, seemingly aware of the states. Suppressing the urge to laugh at John's reaction, I decided to convey just one last thing. Considering the trouble you've caused me, paying the lawyer's fees is only natural. You're an adult, so it's about time you learn to take care of yourself properly. Satisfied that I've spoken my mind, I walked back to the hotel. With this unpleasant problem finally moving towards a solution, I was able to sleep soundly that night. After completing the necessary procedures, I am now officially divorced from John. Thanks to the records of his verbal abuse, I was able to smoothly get divorced with him. I started living on my own and now enjoy a comfortable life. John and Michael are still living together in the same house. However, with me no longer there to support and manage the household, and considering John still pays the lawyer fees in installments, their financial situation seems quite tough. Considering both of them used to spend money recklessly, it's unlikely that this will suddenly change. John seems to be working desperately, but with more of his income going into the household, he's complaining that he can't spend money on alcohol and hobbies. As for Michael, his argument with John at the garbage dump was witnessed by clients of the insurance company, and he lost the trust of the neighbors. Insurance is something you can only rely on people you trust. Even though they used to think he was a nice person, word kept spreading, and apparently, he was encouraged to resign from his job. Michael, infuriated by that, resigned from his job. However, he had no savings and couldn't cover his living expenses. As a result, he's currently working part-time jobs while being caught up in the job hunting process. From the home I left behind, it appears there's no room for maintaining appearances, as the arguing voices of John and Michael echo every day. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying a smooth and delightful life in my solo living arrangement. With the freedom of time that I couldn't easily find while caught up in household chores, I'm even considering exploring new hobbies. Having more time on my hands also allows me to approach work with a sense of ease. I'm now actively engaged in my job with the intention of giving back to the company that supported me. Living these fulfilling days, I truly believe that divorce was the right decision. From now on, I intend to live my life for myself and face my computer with that in mind.